Hello,
Hi,
I'm Aericka.
and I'm Kim.
Welcome back to Spiritual Momma's podcast.
Yes, thank you for being here with us.
Awesome. Today is this part three? Part three
Yes, I
of
think so.
our spirit of the raising your vibrations. So we'll talk about that. But how are you right now?
I'm doing okay. I am actually in this moment, and probably just because I just ate, I'm like a little bit like, but I'm sure that will turn around when my body absorbs the energy.
Yeah, I actually was having the same thought. Same thought. Yeah, I'm doing good. Let me run a scenario by you because it's been bothering me.
Okay.
All right. So when I do certain things, I call in my helping spirits.
Yes.
And then you're supposed to release them. You're supposed to bless them, thank them, and release them.
Okay.
The other day, I forgot to do that.
Mm-hmm.
My question is, do you think they were just like running behind me the whole day? Like, hey, do you see me? Did she see us?
Yeah.
Did she see, that meme or whatever it is?
I see you. Do you see me?
Exactly. Or were they like mad and be like, this bitch didn't even say thank you? Do I like need to call them back in and be like, I'm so sorry. Please don't curse me. Like what?
Yeah, that's a great question.
So now I'm like afraid that my spirits like hate me because I didn't thank them and release them. Like they'd run around with me all day.
I don't think that they like have a vendetta out against you or
good
hate
to know.
you. You may want to have a conversation with them and just like, hey, do you need this from me? Because I am willing to give it. As far as thanking them and releasing them every single time, I know that's like the ideal of getting to. I don't know what happens if you don't get there. Like if you just skip that or forget about it or whatever. I've heard that similarly to like us calling them in, they don't have to respond to that.
That is true.
So I would imagine that they also don't have to stay when we're done with our
I hope
practice.
not, because I felt really bad. Like halfway through the day, I was like, oh, I forgot to release. And all I could imagine was like this little string of spirits running behind,
just following you like a tail all day.
That's all I could think. I was like, oh my god.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, I feel better that I'm not either cursed or they're not really angry at me and still just attached to me.
Yeah, I don't think that's how that works, but I would definitely ask them how they feel about it.
Yeah, definitely the next time I call them, I'm going to be like, by the way, the last time I forgot to release you and thank you, I apologize.
Yeah.
All right. Good.
Let's see where that goes. Let me know. Let me know what they say.
I will let you know.
Holding grudges. I need to...
Right?
I need to be more aware of that.
Is that how curses start?
I don't know.
Is that how like misfortune happens? I hope not. Anyway. All right. Cool. Let's get into it.
We'll check back in on that one. But like you mentioned, today is part 3. Mm-hmm. So this is, going through the series of ways to raise your vibration. Mm-hmm. We've talked about a lot of different things you can do and how to do them and how they help. And this, I think, what we're going to talk about today is going to be a little bit more leading into other areas too, like definitely using it to raise your vibration, but also as a practice, how it can help in other ways.
In multiple different ways.
Yeah, definitely. So we're going to be talking about gratitude and journaling.
2 of your favorite things.
I have found that practicing gratitude is simple. It is not easy.
That makes sense. Yeah.
Very simple practice to do, but it can be very difficult depending on so many different factors. But a lot of it has to do with how I'm feeling. If I am feeling disconnected from gratitude, from gratefulness, then it's really hard for me to practice gratitude. So, and I think that's probably across the board for a lot of people, but
yeah.
Have you thought about like some of the reasons why it can be difficult for you to practice gratitude?
One, I think it's a conscious thing, like actually having like consciously having gratitude.
Yeah.
And making it just something that needs to happen.
Yeah.
That, for one, is for me, because it's not something I ever really kind of thought about.
Mm-hmm.
And or needing to do it as a normal practice.
Yeah.
And two, I think, at least for me, I associate having gratitude with having a good mood and having things to be grateful for.
Yes.
And that's not always the case.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it is always the case.
Yeah.
That there is something thankful to be for. But realizing and recognizing that I think is the rub. And I think, I don't know if maybe, again, it's just myself or the people that I've been exposed to.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like it's easier to be in a bad mood than it is to be in a good mood. And it's easier to find things not to be thankful for than to be thankful for.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know why that is.
Mm-hmm.
I have no idea. Again, I don't know if it's just the people I'm exposed to or myself or what.
Yeah. I think that's an interesting kind of look on it. Like, where does that come from for you or for other people who experience that? For me, I agree. It's easier to be in a bad mood. Mm-hmm. In my experience, I have found that is a protective mechanism. If I am thinking about things that I'm worried about or things that could potentially go wrong, or if I am hyper focused on like wearing blinders and just looking at the negative, theoretically, that's me preparing for how do I deal with when this all blows up.
That makes sense.
So it's been more of a protective mechanism, but I'm not alone in that. I know that's also an environment like I grew up in with people that are constantly looking at those negative aspects.
I think that makes sense. I think that if it just depends on how you grew up and at what you were exposed to for that whole time. I'm sure there's people out there that have grew up in like a very positive environment. And so therefore they are, more prone to be more positive. I'm actually normally a positive person, but it's just easier to fall back into that negativity than it is to fall into positivity.
Yeah. Yeah. It's kind of similar to that. The understanding that like it takes more muscles to smile than to frown in your face. So if you're putting effort into smiling, that takes a lot of effort and energy. Whereas if you're frowning, it may be easier to do. I say that with air quotes, but sometimes it has a lot to do with just like our environment, who's around us, the things that we've experienced. Again, with the vibrations, like what are the vibes of the people around us and where are they at?
Right.
So I do think that has, like it plays a big role in that. But in trying to come out of that and trying to be more conscious of the things that we're grateful for, one of the things that always comes to mind for me is how, and we talked about this before, like if I'm looking outside and it's a bright sunny day, just trying to be able to connect with, okay, what's the warmth feel like? And trying to connect with that as opposed to being super excited or happy if I am not. But on a smaller scale, when we're looking at like, if I'm making a gratitude list, what that would look like, I would bring that down to very simple things. Maybe I don't need to be grateful for, being... I'm going to put this in the sense of like, if I have the flu,
okay,
I'm not going to be grateful for being awake when my body is like aching and I have a fever and I'm sick and I'm nauseous and da-da-da. So bringing it down to like these smaller things. I'm grateful that I have the opportunity to continue to struggle through this. Or I am grateful for the soup that somebody brings me. Or I am grateful for the people that I love to be healthy. Like I bring it down to some of those things sometimes to make it a little bit easier when I'm struggling.
Yeah, I think gratitude and reframing go hand in hand. Because like you said, I'm grateful to be able to go through this experience, even though you're sick. So it's not a great experience, but you're gaining experience, you're gaining knowledge. It's almost like gaming, your XP, you're gaining XP. Even even if it's a bad experience, you still gained XP, and XP is good. So I think you have to have gratitude to be able to reframe, to therefore make it more positive, to therefore have higher vibration.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
And I wanted to kind of go into a little bit about like what are the benefits of being grateful, because we're talking about it now in the sense of raising your vibration, which absolutely it can do. But there are so many benefits, like real life, everyday benefits that you can have from practicing gratitude.
Mm-hmm.
And we often overlook that.
Okay.
So one of the ones that I wanted to highlight was like how gratitude, a regular practice of gratitude, can decrease the impact of stress.
Okay.
It does not eliminate stress,
mm-hmm.
but how stress affects you becomes vastly different when you are practicing gratitude.
Mm-hmm.
And that has a lot to do with the reframing.
Yep.
If I look at this situation, if I am stressed about finances, and that, I mean, for so many people can be such a huge stressor.
Mm-hmm.
It can dictate, for me, it can dictate how I show up in certain spaces. It can dictate the presentation that I give. I might be more on edge. I might be more irritable. I might be snippy with people when my finances are tight.
Mm-hmm.
And so if I'm stressed about finances and I'm not practicing gratitude, not only is my vibration low, but I am putting out like the very bare minimum and probably worst parts of myself.
Mm-hmm. That makes sense.
So when I'm practicing gratitude regularly, my frame of mind starts to change. Yes, I am still stressed, and these other spaces that are here are filled with gratitude for whatever.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to give an example. When we bought this house, it's a 2-family home. And when we bought the house, we had tenants move in, and we've had tenants for however long. The last official tenants we had were my father and his wife. And they moved out. I don't even remember when now at this point.
It was a while ago.
2019. Yeah, it was several years ago. But when they moved out, that was the first time that we weren't prepared to have like another tenant come in.
Mm-hmm.
And the very first thought was like, oh my God, how are we going to afford
this
house without
because you've always had two people paying, basically.
Yes, we've always had income coming in to help go towards the mortgage and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And that was a huge freak out moment.
Mm-hmm.
A very stressful time. And I had finished my master's degree and started working and gaining income at a much different level than I had before.
Yeah.
So when we actually sat down and looked at it, we could afford to have the whole house to ourselves and pay all of the bills, get everything covered. The stress of like that financial stress of like, oh my God, we're losing so much income was offset by like the gratitude that we are able to cover it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Whereas, and even though we were like able to cover it, it's not like we were able to cover it and had all this extra.
Right.
There was no extra.
It would have been nice had you had the increase in income and had the continued income from the rental. Yeah. That would have been nicer, but.
Right. But not looking at it from that perspective and just seeing like, okay, I'm grateful that I'm not worse than this. I'm grateful that I'm in an opportunity where I can afford to maintain this now. And recognizing that decreased the stress. It didn't, or decrease the impact of the stress. It didn't eliminate the stress. The stress was still there. We still had to figure out, okay, how are we going to like live comfortably or have extra income? But it changed the way that I viewed it.
Yeah.
So recognizing how much of a difference, and that's like a bigger thing, but even on a small scale, you know, practicing gratitude can help decrease the impact of stress on a person.
So do you, probably gonna get into this, but I'm gonna ask anyway. Do you say certain things, you know, like affirmations, like you say certain affirmations? Is it like that? Like you say certain things for gratitude, or you like just kind of start stream of consciousness? Like how do you do the gratitude?
It has changed over time. Now it is not a practice that I do in the same way. So when I first started practicing gratitude on a regular basis, it was part of my journaling, which we'll talk about that piece of it all too. But it was part of my journaling, and I don't like trying to come up with that on my own. Or I didn't initially.
Yeah.
Trying to figure out what I was grateful for on my own initially was really difficult. So I used prompts, and it was like, it might have been like, well, what are you, what's something what's an experience that you're grateful for today? And the next day it might have been, what is your favorite food? And the next day it might have been, what moment with another person was important for you today. So it like reframed it a little bit, so it wasn't just like, what are you grateful for? And it looked at different aspects of your life, different areas. And what I was using at the time was a 7-day prompt. So it was 3 things that you're grateful for, but it had 3 specific questions every day. And those 3 things changed every day for 7 days. And then you start over again.
Okay.
So that was initially how I did it. And then it became more accessible. It was something that I could do on my own, that I could recognize, like this moment of, stress, and how can I reframe that, or what am I gaining from this experience? And now it's something that kind of just is incorporated into my journaling. I don't necessarily say like I'm grateful for, but I do highlight like the positives. And I tend to minimize or omit the negative in my journaling unless it's something major. If it's something that seriously impacts me and I need to process how I feel, then I can journal about it. But generally, I'm just focusing on, like, my journaling, if you read it, is very much like glass half full.
Yeah.
Type of journaling.
Yeah. Well, I mean, and if we're going back to the raising the vibration, doing the gratitude again reframes it into a more positive light.
Yeah.
And that way, the more positivity you have, the better the vibration is going to be. So, yeah, I can see how that definitely helps.
Yeah. The other side of that too is, not just when it's difficult to think of things that you're grateful for, but, and we talked about this before, this like toxic positivity. I am not here for it. It's not my jam. I don't really enjoy that. When something is awful, I allow it to be awful.
Yeah.
And it doesn't have to completely tear apart my current reality. So if something terrible happens, I was in a car accident earlier this year, and that was, I've been in enough car accidents. I'm like, oh my God. I've been in enough car accidents.
Been there, done that.
Yeah. That the act of being in the accident itself was not like super detrimental, but that car I had since 2012, and it was my baby. I loved her. Aww. When I got into the accident, I started to cry because I knew my car was done. And in that moment, and I guess this is how I would say I was practicing gratitude in that moment, I was verbally out loud in my car by myself, thanking my car for everything she's done for me and for protecting me in that moment and not allowing that to be dangerous for me. Like, she gave it her all. 100%. So,
like, I'm just imagining this. I'm like, oh, poor car.
Yeah.
Rest in peace, car.
Yeah. Her name was Ivy.
Oh, rest in peace, Ivy.
Yeah. But that, like, even something like that is like, this moment is a terrible moment. This is not a good thing. There is no like, oh, this is awesome, or let's look at the silver lining. No, I'm not happy right now, but I'm still grateful.
Yeah.
So finding the balance between those things where it's like, okay, things don't have to be all doom and gloom. Things don't have to be all rainbows and sunshine. You can find a happy medium where it leans towards the positive, where you can recognize the positive and acknowledge that sometimes things are crappy. Sometimes things don't go well.
I think that's an interesting thought, because that's perfect sense. That makes perfect sense. It's real. It's reality. When we're talking about vibration, I don't think, maybe people are thinking this, but I don't think it's like we're trying to be positive 24/7.
Yeah.
And that we have to be all like roses and rainbows and clouds and bright light. I don't think that's the point.
Yeah.
I think that, like you said, in that moment, it was bad. It sucked. It was not a good thing, but you were still able to have gratitude. I think, therefore, it didn't bring your vibration down. It didn't tank your vibration. It didn't bring it down to this super low level that therefore you had to drive yourself back up to it. I think practicing these things on a regular basis, I don't know, just theorizing here. Practicing these things on a regular basis so that you're kind of a baseline at a higher vibration.
Yeah.
That when things do not go the right way, or things happen, or things are bad, that it might disrupt it to a degree, but it's not going to like tank it.
Right.
I mean, that's my thought, right?
No, I completely agree with you, because it's not like an experience where your entire world is being knocked over and you're starting from zero again. So you get to maintain this higher level. And that is exactly what I'm talking about with like the stress, the impact of stress is less. It's not that it's not there, but it just doesn't affect you in the same way.
Yeah. And I think part of too is like what we're saying about all these different things that we're learning for the vibration is, I don't think you could do just one of these things and therefore that's the point. I think you have to kind of practice all these things. Like, I can't imagine that just practicing gratitude on a regular basis is going to be, the thing.
Yeah.
It might be the thing that you needed to add to your practice, and that brought you up to where you needed to be. But I don't think like just doing gratitude or just doing journaling or just doing some of these, one or two of these things is 100% what you should be doing. I think that to start somewhere, if you're like, I don't have time to do things, or whatever, starting there is a good starting point, and then building with these different practices, I think. Because that's definitely how I started.
Yeah.
I don't remember what I started with, but, I think that's where I'm and I'm through learning this stuff that we're talking about, I'm going to continue to add to. So therefore, on a regular basis, my vibration, I'm at a higher vibration on a regular basis. So therefore, I'm not as heavily affected.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. And this is one of those things where, like, because we're talking about all of the things that can help you raise your vibration, we're breaking it down into, okay, this one thing. But this is also the research that you do when you're going through it naturally. Like, okay, I want to start here, but I need to learn everything there is to know about it. And by no means are you and I covering everything there is to know about these things.
Absolutely not.
But this is a good starting understanding. This is like gratitude 101.
I was just going to say, this is spirituality 101. Yes. How do you get your intuition up there, better in tune? Yeah. This is 101. Yeah, literally. This is like 101.
And knowing what works for you versus what works for other people. There are people that can say they do it in XYZ way and that works for them and that's great, but that may not work for me. So, I think about when I first started to learn about gratitude, it was outside of the context of my own spiritual journey. It was in the context of treatment. I was working in a residential clinic, and the clients were learning about and encouraged to practice gratitude on a daily basis. But for them, it was name 3 things that you're grateful for. Not just every day, but like 3 times a day. Or anytime they started to say something negative, what are 3 things that you're grateful for? And for me, that approach doesn't work.
Yeah. I think I see that a lot in the mental health industry, is practicing gratitude. And we've used these phrases before. We've talked about how these are like buzzwords all the time and not really understanding what they mean.
Yeah.
Until we kind of delve into them and start to use them for ourselves. But I see that all the time, practicing gratitude journals. Okay, you're seeing a mental health professional for a reason. So it's going to be extraordinarily hard to do gratitude. I like how you said that, you started with those prompts and it wasn't necessarily I am thankful for.
Yeah.
I like that.
Yeah. That was a way of me looking at it different. And actually it was a therapist that I was seeing at the time that had suggested it. And she sent it to me and I was like, oh my God, first of all, and I was and still am, but at the time that I was seeing this therapist, I had already been a therapist
right.
for however long. And I was like, what? Like, you can look at it this way? Like, it was completely eye-opening for me. So that was super helpful. And that also got me thinking of like, how do you do things maybe outside of the box? How do you do things to make it fit for you?
Right.
And not just what it looks like for everybody else.
It goes back to what we were talking about last week about the Western, like kind of pulling it like piece by piece. You know, it's almost like in using gratitude in the mental health world for some people, not every therapist, but it's just kind of a piece, and it's like very compartmentalized and very specific. And if you do it this specific way, you're going to have a specific reaction. And it's like, well, no, because our bodies and our minds and our experiences are all different.
Yeah.
So we have to come at it from different directions.
Yeah. And absolutely, there's all these differences. And even if what you're saying would work for me, am I in the space where I'm ready for that, or that I'm going to receive it in that way? Like maybe I need to take 10 steps before I even get there. So all of those pieces are super important. And I think with gratitude in particular, what you can find is that it's not just about you. It's not just about what you're grateful for. It's also about when you're making those connections. You know, sometimes what I'm grateful for is that my son has the opportunity to go to school right now for free. Yeah. Like, that's amazing. Yeah. And that has nothing to do with me, and everything to do with him and his opportunity and what he's doing. Or I'm grateful for, you know, my niece and nephew having the opportunities that they have, or receiving the love that they receive, or whatever. Like, sometimes it's not about you. Yeah.
Yeah. So, in the more kind of like spiritual realm and intuition realm and vibration realm, the book I referenced in the first episode about vibration, Dr. Joe Dispenza.
Yeah.
Undoing yourself, learning to undo yourself. I'll relink it because I can't remember the name right now. But anyway, he talks about having practicing gratitude as if your future self has already had that experience. So we talked about kind of being able to guide our own reality and our own like goals. And so I've been visualizing what I want to have in 6 months, like what my life will be in the next 6 months.
Yeah.
And I've been very much visualizing that on a daily basis. And then therefore having that feeling of gratitude as if I've already had this experience.
Yeah.
Which that blew my mind. It never even occurred to me that you should do that.
Yeah.
I guess I've always thought about like, you know, what my thoughts would be. Like, I've had goals and visualizing those goals. But when it comes down to this, like really visualizing and really putting effort into it, having that gratitude for something that has not happened, but you have the gratitude for, therefore it's going to be more likely to come to fruition.
Yeah.
Very fascinating.
Yeah.
It's a very interesting concept.
It's amazing how something like that can even exist, and then that you can, you know, feed into it in that way, and how you get benefits from that. It's not something that I had thought of at all till you said it, but I can see how in other areas, how that is something that we talk about all the time, right? Like fake it till you make it, or where was I where I heard this? I don't remember where I heard this, but I had heard somebody talking about like, oh, when you're trying to lose weight and want to, you know, okay, I want to lose weight so that I can run around with the kids and be more healthy and active. You need to act like you are now, because when the time comes, you'll already be in it. It's not just going to happen because you want it to happen. So just because you lose the weight doesn't mean that you're suddenly going to be more active with the kids.
Right.
But it's acting as if you are now.
That makes sense.
So in that way, I have heard about this before, but never in like this spiritual sense, or this gratitude, or, you know, thinking about manifesting and what that looks like. And
yeah, it's part of the manifesting process is visualizing that feeling of gratitude.
Yeah.
it blew my mind when I read that. I was like,
Mm-hmm.
it makes sense, but like never even crossed my mind. So yeah.
Being so connected to that. And I know what it feels like when I am connected to other things, right? Like if I remember an experience from the past that actually has happened and that is something that I'm grateful for, I know how much that can affect me now, how great that can make me feel now, how much that can make me, you know, more motivated and be pushed now. So doing the same thing for, you know, acting as if for the future.
Which is a good idea because I was like, well, how do you do that?
Yeah.
Because that's kind of a weird concept. But what you just said, starting with something you remember being grateful for and that feeling that has when you remember it, translating that to something that hasn't happened, just remembering how that feeling is and then kind of transferring it to the new feeling. And that's kind of how I've been approaching that.
Yeah.
Just really being specific about the thoughts in my head about how it makes me feel physically and mentally and everything. So
that's an awesome one. I definitely want to practice that more. And maybe that is like an evolution of how I'm practicing gratitude now. Is now applying it in that sense. So some of the things that people don't always realize that can be impacted by a practice of gratitude, a benefit of side effect, can be like having improved relationships. If I am more grateful, then I am presenting more grateful in my relationships, and so then I can participate better. Relationships are not just one person, so you can't, you know, the entire relationship can't fall on one person to manage. But the people around us, especially the people closest to us, tend to naturally respond to how we are bringing our energy.
Absolutely.
And we see this in small ways, which is, I think that's my frame of mind all the time, is like, how do I notice this in a small way so that I can apply it to the big?
Yeah, that makes sense.
But we see this in small ways, like with slang words or certain phrases. If a person starts to use a certain phrase or a slang word in their, let's say, friend group, and they're the first person to use it, the other people in the group pick up quickly, and all of a sudden it's our thing. Now we're all doing it. Or in other interactions, if I always approach, you know, my boyfriend with, hey, how are you today? I love you. Or like some sort of positive energy, regardless of where he's at, he's not going to try and bring me down. And I've seen this happen where he'll, even when he's in a bad mood, he'll come in the house and he'll be in a bad mood and I'll be like, hey, love, how you doing today? And he'll be like, I love you. Not right now. And that's okay. But it's like, he's responding to where I'm at. So it becomes our natural, you know, interaction. So being able to like have better relationships, you can play a role in that by practicing gratitude and seeing the benefits for yourself. And then that extends into.
Well, I think that also when it comes, especially like a partnership, if you, because there's always something that makes you annoyed in your relationship, right? So if you are focused on that, then it's harder to continue to feel good about that person.
Yeah.
Because then you're focusing on, he never puts his underwear into the dirty basket.
Yes.
Why is that a thing?
I think they learn it in school.
They must.
I think it's real. I'm like, you know, your socks are right next to the hamper.
The hamper is literally right there. Why?
What?
Anyway.
But you could crumple up a piece of paper and throw it into a basket on the other side of the room.
But not the socks.
Yes. Yeah. No, I feel you.
But if that was my focus every time and it made me angry every time, then other things are going to start to make me angry and other things are going to start to make me angry. But if you practice gratitude, then you can start to see the more positive things in the relationship.
Absolutely.
You know, like it just, and then it can just make the bond better. So you're not going to have less resentment and less like negativity. because of that.
Yeah. And in the same way that, you know, practicing this helps to raise your vibration, you're not holding on to the tension there when you're practicing the gratitude and sharing that. So it can help to raise your partner's vibration, and, you know, like they will respond to you and match you where you're at more often than not. So,
right.
And, you know, there's obviously cases where that doesn't happen, but, just an understanding of like the work that you put in and how you can see that reflected in your environment or the people around you.
Definitely.
So, some of the other things too that come up is like, this idea of resilience and how that can be strengthened when you're practicing gratitude, because you're bouncing back and focusing on like the things that you're grateful for or the positive. In a spiritual sense, for me, what I have found is that this journey is a really hard journey for me to like understand. You and I have had, I can't even tell you how many conversations where it's like, oh, I know I'm getting in my own way because of XYZ. And then 2 months later, oh, I'm getting in my own way because of XYZ. And 2 months later, I'm getting in because of XYZ. Like, how many times I keep going through and hitting the same wall and hitting the same wall and hitting the same wall and having to like pivot. And if I don't know this because I'm not in this place, but I can imagine if I wasn't practicing gratitude in the way that I am and have been, that would have been so defeating. That would have brought me way down.
Yeah, I can see that.
I think there's an important aspect of it there is like, yes, in the spiritual sense, but in any sense, when you're not practicing gratitude, and I practice gratitude on a regular basis, and it's like daily or pretty close to daily that I'm practicing it, even though it doesn't, you know, I'm not sitting down saying I am grateful for XYZ. But I am practicing it very, very regularly. But even if you're not at that place, you don't have to be like, oh, I never practice gratitude to I'm practicing it every day, but just start somewhere.
Yeah.
Like, hey, let me try 2-3 times a week to reset my mindset.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't practice gratitude. I don't think not at a conscious level of it. I think for me, my gratitude would be more reframing, and mindfulness is kind of how, I guess if you could break it down, it probably is gratitude, but it's that reframing and mindfulness piece to it that I try to flip what I'm thinking about a negative situation.
Yeah.
You know, how can I flip this in my mind that yes, this is a negative situation, but you know, how can I make it so it's not going to affect me so significantly?
Yeah.
You know, so it doesn't kind of continue to bother me or whatever.
Yeah. I mean, that definitely counts. And that goes back to how does it work for you? Right.
Yeah.
What I'm doing, what anybody else is doing may not fit for you. And that's okay. It doesn't have to be cookie cutter.
Yeah.
So being able to just recognize the importance of that. And of course, like the obvious things, right? You are highlighting happier memories, happier ideas, happier thoughts, more optimism when you're practicing gratitude in any sort of way. So those are all things that can shift when you're doing that.
Yeah. And as far as the vibration thing goes, when we talked originally about how certain thoughts have certain frequencies, and the happier thoughts have higher frequencies, and they're easier. They help your energy. They give you energy, whereas the more negative thoughts take your energy. So even just saying thank you is gonna vibrate at a higher frequency.
Yes.
You know, is it the highest? No, but you know, it's a start. You know, so I think you got to start somewhere.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, it's interesting that you brought that up because something like saying thank you can be used in so many different ways.
True.
Not just like expressing thanks for someone or for whatever situation or whatever. But even in a situation where you might originally say, I'm sorry. Mm-hmm. And I see this in like those little memes or something where it's like, don't say I'm sorry in an email, say thank you. Like instead of I'm sorry I was late, thank you for waiting for me.
Yeah.
Even in a sense like that, you can start to reframe the words that you're using, mm-hmm. and that will start to shift how you're viewing things. And that could be a natural way of mm-hmm. introducing gratitude into your practice.
Yep. I like that.
Yeah. So that's a big one. It's like, there's all these different ways that you can access it. But mm-hmm. The other piece of all of this is like the journaling. And I think those things go hand in hand. Mm-hmm. For me, they go hand in hand. I know that not for everybody they do, mm-hmm. but especially if you're starting a gratitude practice with writing down things that you're grateful for.
It goes back to like that visual.
Yeah.
Because we talked about we're very visual people.
Yeah.
And getting it to where you can actually read it and see it mm-hmm. does something for me. Mm-hmm. You know, so it, and definitely, you know, if you're a more visual person, I think it's going to be helpful.
Yes. Yes. I have had the experience myself, and I have had this experience with other people where it's like, why don't you actually... probably the most recent thing that I can think of with a client was, you know, they were in a place where they were struggling, and months ago we had done some gratitude stuff, and like they had fallen out of it, and that happens. Like mm-hmm. sometimes you do. And I was like, when we get off this session, I want you to go back to that journal, mm-hmm. find it wherever it is, and just review your gratitude list and see how you feel about it now. Because mm-hmm. maybe you feel differently about it now. Mm-hmm. And the next time we got on session, that client was like, oh my God. She was like, that brought me to such a good place. That's just awesome. To remember there are things that I'm grateful for. Mm-hmm. She couldn't think of them in that moment because of how she was feeling.
Right.
But having gone back and looked at it, it was like, oh, wait a minute. I do appreciate this. I'm glad for this. I'm happy that this experience happened. Mm-hmm. And that was able to help her connect more with reasons to keep going.
I think that's a good point of journaling in general.
Yeah.
Is to be able to go back and look at it.
Yeah.
You don't necessarily have to,
mm-hmm.
but it's definitely something you can do to mm-hmm. as part of the practice.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Ideally, I always try to like gauge this with people when we're talking about it. Some people will journal about something and go back and look at it, and it brings them right back into that moment. And if that moment wasn't helpful or healthy or positive or great, that can be a very mm-hmm. tricky situation. And other times you can go back and be like, okay, I can see where I'm in a different place, or I can see how amazing that was, and mm-hmm. that brings me up. So ideally, you want to be able to know where you're at in that. Like, yeah. What's the effect going to be on you?
Yeah. What's the point? Why am I journaling? Is it a set it and forget it? Or is it a, I'm going to come back and reflect on this, or I want to know what I was thinking in this particular time, or,
yeah.
So you have multiple different journals.
Yeah.
I was not a journaler
mm-hmm.
until more recently. And my first way I started journaling was to journal about the meditations that I was having and what I was seeing in the meditations, mm-hmm. because I wanted to go back and be able to kind of reflect on those.
Yeah.
One, because I kind of wanted to know how I did it. Yeah. And two, you know, when you're journaling about the visions you're seeing, it's not always something that you can kind of conceptualize until you go back later and read it.
Yeah.
So that's how I started journaling, was just kind of my visions.
Mm-hmm.
Now I've started doing meditation daily,
mm-hmm.
and most days. And then I will try, if I have time, to journal on what I meditated on.
Yeah.
And also I have a journal for my shaman class,
mm-hmm.
what I'm learning in there, and what I'm feeling about it, and like kind of the techniques and stuff. So those are kind of the journals that I have.
Yeah. I like that. And they sound organized.
They sound more organized than they probably are, but yeah.
Yeah. Well, they sound, organized enough. I feel like, I know that I've mentioned this before, like the millions of journals I have.
Mm-hmm.
But it's like, if I don't know where it's going to go and I don't have another journal to start, then I'm throwing it in wherever.
Mm-hmm.
So if anybody ever looks back at my journals when I am gone, I'm sorry. And that's all I can say right now. No, I'm sorry. Not I'm sorry. Thank you for being patient with going through my journals, because they are all over the place. I was looking through some the other day, and it's like I have entries from like 2021 for like 6 months, and then nothing for like a year, and then I picked it back up again, and it's like, wow. But in that time, I have other journals that I've been, putting my energy
so
into.
what are you using the journals for, though? Are you using it as a set it and forget it? Are you using it so you can look back at it? Like, what's the purpose of the different journals that you have?
Theoretically, the purpose of all of my journals is for me to look back on them. And I do, but I don't always do it in a timely manner.
Mm-hmm.
And also, sometimes I lose them when I switch bags. Like if I haven't done that lately because I haven't been carrying a purse, but if I have a purse that I'm carrying my journal in, and then I switch to a different purse, it may not make that transfer, especially if I'm switching down to something smaller. Like, oh, this is just a day trip and I just need to carry like my wallet with me. It may not make that transfer, and then I may not get back to it until I find it a year later.
Yeah.
When I go back to that purse. So
when did you start journaling? Because you've been doing this way longer than I have. So,
gosh. The most honest answer that I can give you is that I don't remember a time that I wasn't journaling.
Like, you're one of those people that had like a diary as a kid.
Yep. Yep. I am one of those people that had a diary as a kid, and I would write in it in Pig Latin, and my dad found it and found out that I had a crush on a boy on TV.
No.
And he was like, you don't know what crushes are.
Oh no.
Stop writing about this.
Oh no.
Yeah.
I love it.
I have always journaled. I definitely go through phases where like there have been like significant periods of my time of my life that I haven't journaled. But I find that it's something I always come back to. It's like a comfort thing for me. It's something where I can express myself. I can explore what's going on with me. I can practice gratitude. I can process thoughts. I can dive deeper into certain things. And it's also a place where I could just like write things down that don't make sense and be fully like, this is where I am right now, and I'm going to write it here, and nobody else has to know about it. So it has always been a part of my life. And I think now it's becoming purposeful in a different way, because I'm not just documenting, but exploring this spiritual journey. It is allowing me to direct my energy, as opposed to like whatever's happening today, or, regardless of whether we're talking about relationships or emotions or whatever. It's not just that.
Do you tend to use ones that have prompts? I guess that goes back to gratitude, but prompts, or do you have ones that you just, it's like your free flow, or both?
I tend to not use prompts. I tend to not use prompts in my journals. In like, how you could buy a journal that already has the prompt in it. I don't have any of those. I do have hundreds of prompts online.
Okay.
Like I will look up prompts and, prompts for certain things, especially if what I'm trying to explore, dive deeper into is like, I think we talked about this before, like shadow work. I don't know that that's necessarily what I'm doing, but I will look up specific prompts for diving a little bit deeper and unpacking things, and why does this make me feel this way, and what can I do with that, and that sort of stuff. So yes, prompts are a thing that I have used, but no, I don't use them in my journals in that way.
That makes sense. Yeah, again, I'm fairly new to the journaling, so I don't use prompts, but it's usually just because of the way I'm journaling. I also use a dream journal because I learned how to actually go back and analyze these dreams through the shamanic work, which is super cool. There's 2 different ways to do it, but if anyone's interested, we could do a episode on that one. But yeah, so I recommend to people, and I don't necessarily do this myself. I've kind of done it like just on my phone or whatever, is that if you can't sleep and your mind is racing, putting it on paper or putting it in like a note on your phone can be helpful, because then it gets out of your brain and stops running around and can be on paper. That for me is helpful. But I don't know, some people might find that helpful.
Yeah, no, there's definitely a lot of benefit in doing that. It gives you some distance. There's this understanding that like when you have something that is internal in your mind, when you have a thought that's there or a memory or an experience or whatever that's there, this is going to sound weird, but it kind of like can grow a life of its own. It becomes so much bigger than what it might actually be. So being able to get it out on paper, writing it down, gives you distance from that. And it's like, oh, wait a minute. I had this thought, and the second I said it out loud, that sounded way less ominous than what I thought it was in my head. And the reverses can also be true, where it's like, oh, I know that I should, feel this way, or that I do kind of like myself or whatever. But when I start to verbalize that can grow and gain power. So,
well, getting back to that vibration, what you put out into the ether is what is happening.
Yeah.
So either way, if it's negative or if it's positive, you could grow either way.
Yeah.
And the idea is to hopefully grow the more positive way.
Yeah. So. I think part of the issue there, or not the issue, but part of the drive there is like what you're releasing versus what you're chasing or growing, following, or putting energy into.
I mean, we talked about emptying the cup, know, and so the journaling can be another way to release that, to empty the cup. You release it into the paper. We talked about then you can tear it up and burn it or whatever. Or even if it's just something that sits there and that's not something that that's like your emptying the cup journal, where it just kind of you breathe that life into that journal, and that is what it is. You can use it in that way as well.
Yeah.
So
yeah, there's a lot of different ways that you can go about it. And we talked before about like YouTube and how you can go on YouTube and find ways to find binaural beats or to meditate. You can also find journaling. There's actually, and maybe I'll send you the link to include with the show notes. There's this one woman, and I can't remember her name for the life of me right now, but she does YouTube videos of journaling prompts.
Okay.
And so she will say, okay, we're going to take 5 minutes or 10 minutes and journal about XYZ. And she does it with you. So she's doing her own journaling, and she's just making space for you to do that.
Oh, that's kind of
so
cool.
She gives you the prompt, she gives you the space, she sets the time and holds the time, and we'll have like background music or something going on. So then you can just journal on that. And that's like, that can be a really helpful way for people who don't really know much or aren't really comfortable with journaling to start to get exposed to it.
Plus, sometimes if you have like somebody quote unquote else doing it with you, you could make it something that, oh, I'm doing this. You make the conscious effort to look that person up, so therefore then you sit there and do it yourself, instead of just saying, oh, I have to journal, know. I actually did just remember that a big part of how I started doing the emptying the cup work, the severance work, was actually journaling during our classes. She would give us a prompt, and that's where I started to find out a lot of what I did need to get rid of, or what I was holding on to, because it wasn't anything I was kind of like necessarily as conscious about as I thought I was.
Yeah.
By her giving us like maybe 5-10 minutes with the prompt of, what do you want to get rid of today, or whatever the situation was. So I guess I forgot I did that too. So
yeah.
And like you said, using it so you could see when you get it out of your brain, what is like, is it growing to, what exactly you're exploring, what exactly is it?
Yeah.
it just makes it a little easier to hone in on, I guess.
Mm-hmm. I think the other thing to consider too is like just going back to what works for you. Knowing that there doesn't have to be limits around it. There doesn't have to be like, this is what it has to look like. And, you have to write it down on paper and you have to do it for this much time and you have to do it this many days and you have to have these prompts or be focusing on this thing. Some people that I talk to really highlight like how hard it is to like sit down and write.
Mm-hmm.
And part of that for them, at least the specific people I'm thinking of, is like their brain is going so fast all the time that they can't keep up with that writing.
Right.
So then do a verbal one.
That's
right?
just what I was just going to say.
Like,
do a voice memo.
Yes, a voice note, and you can keep a voice journal.
Mm-hmm.
And that can be helpful too, because when you go back and listen to that, in the same sense that like you're pulling out what you need to pull out and figuring out like, where was I in that? What does this mean? All of that stuff. But you can also hear the patterns in your tone of voice, in what your thought process is, in the things that affect you. So yeah, I mean, just finding what works for you.
In a way, this is our journal.
Yeah.
This podcast is like an extension of our journals, basically. Extension of our thoughts on all of this.
I like that idea. And I mean, I know that I've said this to you and we've talked about this. You've said it as well. I don't know if we've actually said it on the podcast, but anytime that you and I are having conversations or hanging out, I always leave feeling better.
Oh, absolutely.
Like, oh yeah, that was good. Like we're on a flow, we're getting going, we're in a good space. And
yeah. The last 2 times that we recorded, I was just like on cloud 9. It was so good. But I like our energy just kind of like flows, and I always feel good and warm and tingly. But yeah. So, and all of our listeners are now, this is our extension of our journals. You guys get to read our journals. Yes. So you're part of our journal now.
Yeah. And if you are looking to interact with the journal process, this is a good way to do that too, is like giving, sending us messages or letting us know your thoughts, your ideas, where you're at in all of this.
Yeah. Because the whole point is like, I want to know, we're learning this. Like we say this several times, we want to know what other people are going through and what they've done. And, that's the whole point. Because we're still learning and we want other people to feel like part of the fam here. Yeah. Going through this together.
Absolutely. And like our process has led us down this path. Maybe for somebody else, they went down a different path. And so maybe they've experienced things that we haven't yet, or that, we want to know more about too. So
absolutely. So
yeah. So using gratitude and journaling together, separately, along with all of the other things that we've talked about with raising vibrations, there's so many pieces to this. And I think just trying to like get comfortable with the idea of what that means, what you can do, how you can achieve it, what it looks like when you have, and the practices. And you and I talk about like our practices pretty regularly. But mine's always changing.
Mine too.
Right? Like the things that I do, I can do consistently. And some things like don't change in that and they stay pretty consistent. But other pieces I might like put something in or take something out as needed. So
yeah. Well, that's the whole point of this. The whole point of the process is finding what works for you and trying out new ideas. And as you grow in this and as we hone our skills, it's going to change.
Yeah.
Maybe we don't need something. Maybe we need something else, maybe, whatever the situation is. So
yeah, I love it.
Yeah.
All right. That's all I got.
Awesome. That was a good one. Lots of information.
Yes.
So next week, we're going to start talking about meditation.
Yes.
Which I'm super excited about because it's a big one.
It is huge.
Yeah. So
I'm excited about that. As much as I know about meditation, we all know it's not my strong suit. So I am super excited for you bringing that energy and like how you use it, what that looks like.
Definitely been doing a lot of work on that. So delving into it like as a real thought process is going to be fun. So
yeah, cool.
All right. Well,
until next time.
See ya.
Bye.